Well, hello, Jamaica. I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you this time, but I will be there next year. So from cold Britain to sunny climes of Jamaica, thank you for letting me produce this short film for you about what we do. Well, why Enough Abuse UK? What a weird title. Potted version of my life. In another life, I was a deputy head teacher at a church primary school, and I had befriended this guy in church for 17 years. He had become my best friend. For 10 years of that time, he was actually my boss. What I had no idea about until 2002 was he actually was a paedophile. And what I had no idea about either, that came out in 2002, was he had groomed and sexually abused 3 of my 4 children, my 3 sons. That was horrendous. So spending then 2 years, having been very ill with a nervous breakdown, I decided to try and think about how I ever got this wrong. What was it I missed? What I missed was the behaviours. The behaviours of someone who is the risk and the behaviours of the children who are the risk. And that's what I missed. So this whole programme, Enough Abuse, was then born out of this awful trauma. And it's evolved hugely, and we now are across the UK in every sector and across Europe and hopefully now the Caribbean. How lovely would that be? So what is the aim? Well, the aim is that we stay safer. So I come up with these acronyms. SAFER. What does that mean? Well, you sense grooming. You become aware about it. What is going on? Why am I feeling weird, that quirky feeling? And I focus on it. And then, call to action. I have to engage. I must tell people what I'm feeling, what I've seen, and I must record it, write it down. When you write it down, you see a pattern of behaviours forming. But if you don't tell people, and don't tell people what you see and what you feel and what you've observed, what you've heard, then forever it's going to be the taboo subject. And in England now, thanks to the royal family, we're now talking about mental health. That has been a taboo for years. And child sexual abuse absolutely creates a high percentage of mental health issues. And we have to talk about it. There's no doubt we have to. So I'm going to ask you, are you able to prevent it? Well, we are all able to prevent it, but we have to acknowledge first that it exists. And we have to acknowledge that it's rife. It is cultureless. It is global. Do you believe that? Do you believe you actually know a child today, as you're in this conference, you will know a child who's being abused? You are sat in a room with adults who will have been abused. And here comes the big whammer. You will know someone doing it. I'm not saying you could name them, oh yeah, you know, it's John, it's James or whatever, or it's Auntie, but you will know someone doing it. But these 3 categories, we don't walk around with a badge on our head going, abused or abuser. It's the behaviours that speak the language. Those non-verbal communications are essential, the body language. And then you have to listen. What are you listening to? Well, children absolutely lack the language skills when they're young. So it is the behaviour, it is the confusion and the distortion created by this person who is grooming that confuses the child mind. Here, let me meet you, Joe. Here's Joe. And I'm going to ask you, why don't people tell? Well, Joe here is presenting or representing a 4-year-old. So this is how abuse works. It happens by a change in that behaviour, a change in being very fun. The grooming stage is fun. The grooming stage means presents, gifts, very attractive outings, all sorts of fun things go on. And that's nice because we all like presents, we all like being appreciated, we like to feel love, and all those things are nice. And it's the same for a child. But it then changes. When this person has access to this child, something happens. And I'm now alone with this child, and I begin to touch. And now the child's confused, but then I whisper in the ear, You're dirty. You won't be believed. Mummy will die. No one's going to believe you. Who's going to believe that Daddy's done this? Who's going to believe any of it? I love you. You're special. And you never said no. So you've consented. You took the presents. So that's how it works. If you've been bullied, do you remember what the bully said? I remember. I was bullied as a child. I still remember what that person said to me. I don't remember how many times they hurt me, but I do remember. And that's also what stops people. That memory when you're 40, 50 years old, that someone has told you you're dirty and mummy will die, is very impacting. But it's also this culture thing with physical abuse. What does abuse actually do? Well, I know in various cultures, children are smacked, and it's a rule of thumb that this is how we discipline children. So what we want, though, is healthy children, because forms of serious abuse, and that can be sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is incredibly damaging. All these abuses actually impact the developing brain. So here we have a brain, right? Now, if I am going to hit a child a lot and verbally abuse a child, physically abuse, leave it to get on with itself, emotionally abuse it, sexually abuse it, the child is in trauma. And that trauma means that cortisol spikes. And the cortisol is not the same as adrenaline. And the cortisol eats away at the developing brain cells. It actually eats away, changing the shape of the brain, changing the coding of the brain, breaking the neural pathways. So now, look at that. When that child starts school, is it any surprise it appears to be dysfunctional? Or do we ignore it? Do we say, oh, well, you know, that's how it is. It's one of those children just naughty. But all negative behaviours have negative reasons. Are we looking and say, why is that child acting like that? Why? What can we do? Well, we can look at the issues, and we can recode the brain. We can reshape the brain. The brain is developing until you're 25 years old. You can even change the shape of it and repair the neural pathways as an adult. But with children, and it's so essential we get this sorted in the early years, with the right trauma therapy, we can very quickly turn this mashed up person inside here, and we can actually reform the brain. Now, there we go. Please don't also think, which is a time-old thing, that if you've been abused, you'll end up being an abuser, because that's not the case. Many do, some do, but there's lots of other issues behind the why they do it. But most people who have been sexually abused actually find it so repulsive it's the last thing they're going to do. But it's important that we get the early years. Some people would say, oh, you're born like it. No, you're not. If you wanted to prove you're born like it, you'd have to do an MRI scan on every baby born, every single child born. True, if you were born to the mother of a heroin addict or an extreme alcoholic and drugs, that child would have some damage done. But this is something that's gone on in the early years. All abusers, whether we're a physical abuser or what, have had some form of brokenness in their childhood. Now, not all child abusers are paedophiles, and that's something people can't get hold of. About 1 in 5 child abusers are actual paedophiles. Some, 4 out of 5, are child abusers. Maybe the husband or somebody has got issues with their esteem, they don't feel loved, and they don't feel part of the family. Suddenly they find their daughter attractive and they're absolutely mortified by what they are experiencing, and a while later they offend and they're mortified. A paedophile means you have a sexual love and desire of children. Phile, ophile is lover of, pedo, children. We also have infantophiles. Now, an infantophile is a lover of infants, babies under 5 years old. Babies under 5 years old. Then we have hebephiles, over puberty, up to the age of 16. So let's call them all child abusers, because it's easier. And with all child abusers, not all are paedophiles, but those that are very, very serious people, and they will have 5 or 6 children on the go at any one time. And that's a big issue. But we have to raise the alert and the alarm on this. If we don't, you've seen the Play-Doh, but let's look at this. There's 2 people here. I was a primary school teacher, so my visual aids are a bit, but 2 people here walk in the room. Man A, girl B, whatever. We can't see what's going on behind the eyes. Now, the behaviours will tell us. We'll see some quirky behaviours coming out, even as adults who are abused, who have not disclosed and who have not sought therapy. Now, let's have a look at this one. Behind the eyes, behind the eyes of this person, very healthy. This person is all a bit simplistic, no one's life is that perfect, but this person has got everything going to be able to make the right choices, and they have the choices because they're armed with a healthy mind and a healthy support system around them. They can decide, yeah, maybe I'll be that barrister or whatever. The choices are there because their mind is unbroken and complete and healthy and whole. This person, however, who you can't see because on the outside it looks the same, this person, look what's gone on in here. This is what's gone on behind the eyes of someone abused. All that brokenness. Now, with therapy, trauma therapy, we can put all those things up the right way, but you still can't do anything about the ones that are splintered, already lit and burnt. So with therapy, yes, you can do a lot of reparation, but not totally. You can rejig the neural pathways, even for the abuser. It is possible, but some permanence is always going to be there. And that is why it is so vital that we start talking about the abuse, how it happens, and the impact of it. Believe me, we are heading for a train crash if we don't look at this with serious intent. So then, talking about behaviours again, what do these slippery snakes do? How do they infiltrate? Well, the key word is vulnerability. I have sat with offenders who have told me laughingly, we smell vulnerability like French perfume. We can tell a vulnerable person by the micro movements in their behaviour. And that's not difficult. You're walking like this, a child, if you're bonny and bright, but the next day maybe you're like this. That's what they know. They are adept, they are experts at picking out the vulnerable child and the vulnerable couple, the people that are not actually cohesively parenting. And they wait, sinisterly wait, and they will infiltrate the family. You will be befriended first, and I don't think adults understand that. The idea of making you, the mum and the dad, their best friend is over a period of time. You have built up a sense of loyalty, and so you will feel dreadful, like you're betraying them if you were to think anything sinister. That's part of the game. Get you on board first, and all your friends can take 4 or 5 years. It makes it so difficult to then for you to say, oh, he's my best friend, she's my best friend, she's done this for me. I can't say things like that. Oh, yes, you can, because it's part of the game. And that person will groom you in the same way. They will invite you to supper. They'll pay for your things when you have no money. They will be very touchy-feely with your child, more than normal. And maybe some friends will have noticed it. There'll be lots of tickling games going on, but not just tickling games, wrestling games. I urge you to look at the document on the behaviour of the fixated paedophile. There'll be lots of lap sitting going on, where the child is actually sitting on the man's groin, just like this. Like that. See? Now that's not appropriate for a man. Most men would go like that and like that. These are clues. And while the child is sat on my lap like this, I'll have my hand down his pants. And if it's a girl, look what I'm doing here. I'm holding this little girl on my lap like this. She's 8, 9 years old. What is going on with her development? Work it out. Developing breasts. How must that child feel? This is displayed in plain sight. You will be seeing this in plain sight, and your instincts might go, you need to write it down. My statement for the police was 40 pages of missed nanosecond quirky moments. How I wish I'd written it down. Don't be me.